a little bit. I don't know how long you're in the minor leagues before this happened, but that moment that you got that phone call.
I was in AAA playoffs and playing for the Durham Bulls, and we're playing the Charlotte Knights. If we win this game, we go to the AAA World Series. If we lose, we're out. We lose. And so we're sitting there talking about which direction we're going to drive home from Charlotte when the manager comes up and taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "I need to talk to you." I look back at him and I said, "I don't think so." He goes, "Why not?" I said, "Because the last 6 guys you talked to are all crying right now. I choose not to cry." And he just shook his head at me. He said, "Come on."
What's up, guys? How's it going? Welcome to another episode of the podcast, Determined Society. You guessed it. This is Sean French, your host. And today, guys, I have someone with me that, to me, just resonates. Determination, grit. He followed his dreams, and it was never a straight line for this gentleman. He was told at a young age of 25 that he'd never play the game that he loved ever again due to a bunch of injuries. And fast forward 10 years, I'm sure it wasn't a fast 10 years for him. There was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, having to go into the fact that he couldn't do what he loved anymore. And at the age of 35, he found himself on the mound in a Tampa Bay, at the time, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. They are now the Rays here in West Florida. And he's an author of 2 books, most recently, Dream Makers. He's a motivational speaker, but to baseball players, he is the epitome of the American dream. Jim, the Rookie Morris, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. I was telling my wife when we, got in contact, I shot a message to you on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, you know what? You never know. Maybe he answers. And you answer with such grace and humility. And your wife, Shauna, such a sweet soul. And, we were able to get this worked out pretty quickly. And immediately after we booked the show, I had to put my kids in front of the movie, right? They're like, "Well, who is this, Dad?" And my wife was like, "This is amazing." And I look at your story, and like I said before we started recording, it's just we know how it's portrayed, right? And I'm just super excited to have you on the show to at least talk about all those things, right? So that my listeners really enjoy stories of adversity and triumph, right? That's why they listen to my show, because they like to see the problem, and they like to see somebody work, and they like to see the solution or the pinnacle of what's going on. So I know we'll be able to provide that today. And yeah, man, once again, we're here for it. And I do want to talk about your new book, so we'll get to that too. So give it to us, man. We know what we see in the media, but start me off as a kid, because the way it's shown in the movie, your father was in the military and you moved around a lot. So the way it looked, it was you get involved in baseball, then you're having to move again. And then Pops was just like, "Sorry, dude. It's just the way it is." So talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, Sean, what a long story. My father was in the military. We moved everywhere. He was not a nice person. And okay, here's one thing. He's holding my little brother one day. He looks down at me and he goes, "This is the one we wanted. We never wanted you." And that was my life. And physically and verbally abusive. And I tell audiences, I say, the bruises go away. It's the words that stick with you. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. Why do you even try? You're going to embarrass yourself and everybody else. Just give up. And that was him. And sports for me was an escape. And if I could be in between the white lines of a ball field, I could be away from him for only a few hours at a time. And so for the first 15 years of my life, baseball is how I made friends. He didn't like me to talk. Children are to be seen and not heard. So I never talked. And ironically, now I talk for a living. So I guess God was saving it up or something. But baseball for me has been the one go-to in my life. And Even when I couldn't play anymore, I thought, I'll coach it. But at 15, I made the varsity baseball team in MacArthur High School in Hollywood, Florida. Second freshman ever to make the team. And 2 weeks after the season started, my dad said, guess what? You're moving to Brownwood. That move ended up being the best thing for me in my entire life, because I was moving out of a household where I watched two people argue, throw, curse, hit, fight, scream. Moved to Texas where my grandparents were. And when I walked into my grandparents' house, I thought, this is my father's parents. He got it from somewhere. Oh boy. And when I walked in, I was shocked. I had two rules. If you do it, own it. Own it, live up to it, and move on. And number two, tell the truth. You don't have to remember the truth. And those were my grandparents. And they ended up being the dream makers of my life and the mentors that I look up to for people who did it right. They were never rich, but they always found a way to give back. My grandfather had a menswear store in Brownwood, Texas. The population was 20,000 people, but he had this menswear store, and people would come from all over the country. It never dawned on me as a teenager, like most teenagers, it wouldn't dawn on, that since my grandfather had fought in World War II, he knows a whole bunch of people. Well, he knew a lot of people, and people would come into the store all the time from everywhere and buy suits, not just because of the quality of the suit, but because of the quality of the man. And he was such a good, fine human being. I didn't find out till about 10 years ago that he spoke for a living when he wasn't doing work in a store. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Now I talk. And, my grandmother, the opposite. He was 6'3", she was 5'3", but probably the smartest woman I've ever seen in my life. Could hear a piece of music, couldn't read music, but could hear something on the radio, sit down and play it on the piano. And just incredibly talented, incredibly smart, could do trig in her head. She showed me shortcuts in math that I tried to use when I was in high school. And my teachers would go, that's the right answer, but you don't show your work, so it's wrong. Mm-hmm. That's how smart she was. And
wow.
But they took me in, and when a teenager who could have fallen off the rails either way, my grandparents said, no, not on our watch. And they ended up being the biggest mentors of my life. And I worked for my grandfather during the summers, and I would also help my grandmother at church. My grandfather had me take my grandmother on lunch dates once a week the entire time I was in high school, so I would know how to treat women. And, he wanted me to be prepared. Take their arm across the street, keep them inside away from traffic, open car doors, restaurant doors, pull out chairs, all of it. And they taught. For 15 years, I heard screaming and cursing. And the next 3, I never heard a cross word said. I never heard anybody lift their voice. And so for me, walking into that situation, I was almost like thunderstruck. I thought, this can't be true.
This is a movie.
Yeah, but it was. And they were just such good people. And they put me on a road to success. And my grandfather said, what are you going to do when you can't throw a ball hard anymore? When you're a teenager, you're like, I will throw a ball hard as long as I want. Mm-hmm. And then at 40, you start waking up 3 times a night to pee, and you're like, you know what? I can't throw a ball hard anymore. But for him, he wanted me to be prepared for after sports. Mm-hmm. And so he was teaching me lessons every day about character, about morality, about keeping my word. He goes, you are your word. If you break your word, then at the end of the day, people are going to know you if you told the truth or not. And if you didn't, that's how you're going to be remembered. And he was very much that person who did everything right and slow and methodical in the same way every time. Here's a funny story. He would go to market twice a year and buy suits to bring back to his store. And he would call the husbands and he'd go, what kind of suits do you want? And he'd listen to everything they said. And then he did the smart thing and he would call the wives and he goes, what do your husbands want to wear? And he would come back with what the wives told him to bring and they would buy everything. He just knew how to be a people person. And one day, and I didn't learn this till 2 years ago, so this story I'm just kind of sticking in. One day in a store, this man walks in, I recognize him from TV. Now I'm 58 years old, and there used to be 3 channels and I was the remote. And people would find that hard to believe now, but I recognized him from TV. He walks up, he hugs my grandfather like they've been best friends forever. I later found out they were. It was Gene Autry. And then 2 years ago, I'm doing a podcast with Dennis, and I'm telling him this story. He goes, "You're kidding me." He goes, "That was my uncle."
Oh, wow.
And then years later, he's playing me in the movie. So, the world, as big as it is a lot smaller than we think it is.
It truly is. And it's fascinating because a lot of your story, and again, I'm sure my father has a different spin on this. But my father was also very hard on me. He didn't really physically abuse me, but it was a lot of, hey, if you don't play baseball, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle because you can't do anything with your hands. You don't have any skills, right? You can't fix a car. You can't do this. And I always said, Dad, I feel like people like me and I can talk to people. Right. And he's like, well, you can't make any money doing that. And, throughout my whole life, I've been able to generate an amazing sales career and, build my business just on the way of being able to relate to pretty much anybody. Right. And to have great conversations and to be honest and tell the truth. And it's crazy because, sitting here having this conversation with you now is like, I had a feeling I knew there was a contentious relationship with your father. In fact, you talk about it in your new book, Dream Makers, right? You kind of dive into that and just kind of the life after baseball. But, when you see public figures like yourself, you don't really know them, you're like, you never know what somebody's going through in their life, right? We look at celebrities or Major League Baseball players or professional football players and the civilian or the lay person can go, wow, what an amazing life. But we never know what they did to get there. And what I'm hearing from you is that you dealt with a lot of physical and verbal abuse, right? And that was your time, in that 1.5 to 3 hours, depending on the level, right? That you got to be in between those white lines. That was your safe haven. And I have to tell you, Jim, like you and I are more alike than I thought, right? Because I remember no matter what was going on in my life, that the moment I walked through those gates, I was where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if I went over 3 or 3 for 3 or whatnot. Did I get upset when I went over 3? You're darn right I did, right? Because I'm a competitor and I like to win. But I could forget about the breakup with my girlfriend. I could forget about what my dad said to me. I could forget about my parents yelling at each other. I could forget about so many things within the school that happened. Me being bullied because I wasn't in the best shape or I wasn't as good looking as the other guy, right? The game of baseball saved me, right? And as I progressed, it turned into something that I was able to do at a higher level in Division I. But just hearing the story, it's so parallel because I dealt with people yelling and screaming to where and I didn't have the opportunity, to where you were blessed. Like you said, at 15, that move to Texas was the best one you've ever made in your life because you got to see true modeling of a great relationship and respect and love. I didn't have that, right? I just got a bunch of yelling and screaming. So when I would get into a relationship or when I would, get married at first, I thought that's how you disagreed. It's like, no, I got to yell. And, and it's funny because, when you have that other partner, that wife say, well, hey, I'm not used to this. Like, why are you doing this? Right. And it's just strange. I know it's a tangent, but it's super encouraging. And I want everybody listening to really dial in on the fact that just like Jim said, the world is small. It's smaller than we think, but we're also more alike than we're not.
Yeah. We all have opinions.
What's that?
We all have opinions.
We sure do.
But it doesn't mean we're right.
Right. Totally. I want to go through some of the things like, for instance, the high school season, like you coached, I coach, right? It's one of the ways we can give back to the kids and still feel part of the game and compete. And the one thing that I always found really, really difficult was, you don't have that remote control. You can educate the baseball IQ, you can work on the skills, but at game time, it's up to the kids. And the one thing that is always the most challenging is finding ways to motivate or drive the collective unit, right? Because everybody's so different. So it's a lot of times you have to differentiate, right? You do. You have to differentiate, to player X, player Y. Like you've got to coach them differently. The way it's portrayed in the movie is, it's a struggling team. All right. You were coaching, couldn't even grow grass on the baseball field because the deer was eating the seed. Right. And somehow they saw you throw a baseball, and it was like, well, if we win, you got to chase your dream. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a lead up to that story. How it happened was in '99, where the movie takes place. I was on my way to baseball practice, and this athletic director stops me. He was head of the program. He's not the guy who hired me. Mm-hmm. He was the guy they brought in, and he couldn't get rid of me, and that really made him mad. So I was the kicking post. And he goes, "You've taken these kids as far as you can. These kids are losers. They're never going to amount to anything. Their parents are losers. They've never gone anywhere. They're never going anywhere." He goes, "This is a stepping stone for people like me." And he goes, "You may be one of the best baseball coaches I've ever seen, but you're always going to come in last to people like me because I know how to step on people." And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, and they put you in charge of everybody. That's so awesome. But around the corner, there were two of my kids, and they heard it. And this guy destroyed 2 years of work in 90 seconds. And so as the movie opens up after the nuns, 15-1 and 15-0, and we just get run ruled. And so after the second one, I just stand on home plate and I just said a prayer. My grandparents had faith. I've got great faith. And I'm just like, God, what do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. How can I push them without breaking them? How can I get them to believe? How can I teach them if they want something, they have to go get it? They can't just go, I wish I had it. And here it comes. You've got to work for it. Nothing comes easy. And the answer was so simple. It was go down there and teach them what your grandparents taught you. And I thought, I could do that. And I walk down. Nobody's looking at me. They're all looking at the ground. Start talking about hopes and dreams and goals. And I said, you guys have to go out and live life. You can't let life live you. Don't ever let anybody dictate to you what you do with your life. This is your life. And I'm thinking I'm sounding pretty good, right? In the back of my head, I'm like, my grandfather would be proud. They're looking, they're engaged. And then my catcher looks at me. He's my senior on the team. And he goes, what about your dreams? I said, my dream is to see you guys be successful in the classroom, successful on the field, graduate from high school, and then go to college or trade school or whatever it is you want to do. But it's your decision. He goes, well, we think you still want to play. And I said, no, I think I want to stay married. Thank you very much. And by now I'm 35, I weigh 260 pounds.
Right.
Their moms make me fresh homemade tortillas every time we get on a bus to go somewhere. And like, this is a scouting diet. This is not a playing diet. And let's not forget the fact that at 28, I had a surgery in which the doctor said, you will never, ever pitch again. Physically impossible. Mm-hmm. And they just kept challenging me. They're like, coach, but the way you throw to us, we know your heart's still in it. We can't even hit you on this. That's because you can't hit. But you teach us everything about the game. We know you still want to play. And I said, wanting to play and being able to play are two different things. I said, I've had a doctor in the medical field tell me I will never pitch again. Physically impossible. What if we win? Can't do it. You know, we go through all the reasons, including the medical reasons. Well, what if we win a district championship, which these kids never been a part of in baseball? We win, you try out. So for 20 minutes, I did what every parent does. I argued every course of action, and then I caved in. I'm like, all right, if you win, I'll find a tryout. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm old for baseball. I'm fat, and this is going to be embarrassing. Mm-hmm. But if it gets these kids to play, I'll do it. I can embarrass myself for a few minutes.
Yep.
Little did I know what that would do. And they start winning, then they start winning by a lot. And we're running teams off the field. We're not trying to hurt anybody or just score the daylights out of stuff. We're just playing baseball. And we're down by 2 runs in the district championship. And the history would dictate these kids don't come back very well. They come up in the top of the last inning. They score 6 runs. They hold the other team to 0. We win. One of the best sights I've ever seen in my life. I'm watching a group of kids celebrate an accomplishment that not even they thought they could accomplish. By now, I've forgotten about the bet. When we made the bet, they couldn't hit me. By the end of the season, I couldn't get these kids out. And so I forget about the bet because who cares? Yeah. And we're playing and we're winning. And that's when my second baseman hops up on the bus and he goes, we did our part, now it's your turn. Oh, no.
Oh, boy, here we go.
And I've got to go to a tryout. And you know, we get into the second round of playoffs. It was the third game of a 3-game series. School's over, baseball's over. I found a tryout in my hometown of Brownwood at Howard Payne. And when I drive the tryout with my kids who are 8, 4, and 1, I'm looking at all these other kids get out of their car. Tall, thin, athletic looking, brand new bodies, brand new gear, smiling because they're chasing that dream. And I remembered when I was back at that age, what baseball meant to me. And now here I am with my 3 kids, one of which I'm changing her diapers. And I'm here to actually try out again at this age. And I go up to the sign-up table. Doug Gasaway's a scout. He's about 70. He said, how many kids you bring to try out? And I looked down and I said, I brought 3. He goes, no, 2 try out. And I said, let me explain something. I made a promise to a group of kids that if they did something nobody thought they could do, I would try to do something I know I can't do. It's going to be embarrassing. It will be humiliating. You'll get a great laugh out of it. But either you let me throw or I've got to find someone else who will, because I made a promise. When he got done laughing, he looked at me with a serious face and he said, why didn't you just shave your head like every other coach? I said, where were you 3 months ago, man?
That is, it's so funny because you watch the scene in the movie and like, here you are, going to this tryout in your hometown and you have all 3 of your children and you're changing diapers and you're probably sitting there for a long time for your turn. And, you're dealing with all these things and, the mental toughness and the mindset that you have to have at that moment to stay connected with your 3 children, but also to switch your focus on a drop of a dime and go out there and throw pitches. To me, it's everything that life is, right? There's a lot of times where I'll sit here at home and I'm trying to cook dinner and maybe dishes have to be done. And I got 3 kids going, daddy, daddy, daddy. And here you are, you tried out for the minor leagues for a spot on a roster. And I'm complaining I'm in here in the kitchen. That's kind of embarrassing for me, but I'm going to be vulnerable. I just think it's impressive. How did you stay sane in that moment? I mean, like for me, if I had my 3 kids at a tryout and they call my name, I'm going to be pretty frazzled, man. I don't know if I could hit a broadside of a barn at that point.
For me, it was just, let's show up and do this and get it over with. Mm-hmm. I thought, I can't get 16 and 17-year-old kids out now. How am I going to impress a major league scout? Yeah. I'll get this, I'll get done. We'll go home. It's all good. Yeah. And so he hands me a fastball. Last one to try out. They've thrown, they've hit, they've run the 60. And so he tosses me a ball and he said, how many pitches do you need to warm up? I said, to embarrass myself, none. I just want to pitch quickly and run off the field. And he said, all right. He goes back, he picks up his radar gun, tells the young guy, catch me. He goes, give him signs. Gave me a sign for a fastball. I wind up and I throw it. And he's shaking his radar gun. I'm like, I don't even throw hard enough to register. That's ridiculous. And immediately I'm more embarrassed than I thought I would be. Mm-hmm. And then all the young guys threw like 20 pitches. And now I'm up to about 60. And I think they're making fun of the fat old guy, and that's me.
You threw 60 pitches?
Yeah.
That's like a game.
Especially for someone who's been out of baseball for a long time. And by the end of the session, he tells this kid, because everybody had tried out, they're all putting their stuff up in their cars. And as I'm throwing, people are slowly coming back behind the backstop and watching, parents included. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm either doing really good or really bad. And he tells this kid, he goes, go get your bat and get in the box. And the kid goes, you want me to get in there against that? And I thought, So they finally say that's enough. My 1-year-old's crying. I would get my kids to put him in the car and turn the air on. Gasaway meets me. He goes, I remember you. 15 years ago at Ranger Junior College, you were a football star. Everybody wanted to make a picture out of. I said, yes, sir. He said, Jimmy, back then you were tall and thin. You threw 87 or 88. I said, yes, sir. He goes, I don't know what you've done your time off aside from eat, but the first pitch you threw without warming up was 94. Everything after that went up to 98. And I'm stunned. But when somebody tells you you're throwing 98, there's a happy dance going on between your ears, right? Mm-hmm. The next thing that hit me was I had been throwing 98 miles an hour at high school kids. I'm getting sued is what I'm getting. And my kids were hitting 98. No wonder that kid who threw puke to us the last game we couldn't hit because we were so far out in front of it. And he goes, don't be surprised if you get a phone call. It's all right. Put the kids in the car, drive home an hour and 10 minutes. It's not one phone call, it's 12. They want me to come back in 2 days and throw hard. And I tell audiences, I say, this is where walking the walk and talking the talk separate. I call my high school kids and I say, look, I did good. They want me to come back in 2 days. If I do good again, they want me to sign a minor league contract. I said, but this is something I failed at every single time. I was supposed to be young and talented. Now I'm old for this game. Mm-hmm. It's going to be harder. Over here, coaching, teaching, I'm successful at. I know I'm good at. I got a job in Fort Worth at a great big high school. This is good. This over here, bad. I fail every time. I said, Coach, you told us if we ever had our dream in front of us, you'd chase it no matter what. And I said, I was lying. That only pertained to you. And so 2 days later, it rained so bad they had to have me a brand new baseball every pitch. Sliding up to my knee in mud, I hit 98 every time with my 3 kids being watched by half my high school team. And so it was cool to be a part of that. It was cool to watch those kids who, when I pushed them, they pushed back and we made each other better. Mm. And as I'm watching those kids celebrate that championship, for the first time in my life, and all those years it took me, it's lessons my grandparents taught me. It's not about me, it's about we. What can we do to win? Mm-hmm. And, you're exactly right with every kid on a team. Some kids you need to bury a foot in and tell every single day what they need to do. Some kids you need to tell once they run off and they do it. And other kids know what they're doing, and your best coaching is to leave them alone.
Stay out of the way.
But every kid is different, and every kid needs something different. And I think it's fun now to look back and see all those kids being successful in their lives now. And, if I played a small part in that, that's awesome. Mm. But I just want them to know that when they pushed me and I pushed them, we made each other better. We were a team.
The thing that I really love about this story, Jim, is I love the ending, right? I love we'll get to the top of the mountain here in a second of that specific day in Arlington. But to me, what is most impressive about this story is your ability to show your raw authenticity to your kids. There's so many coaches and so many baseball players and baseball coaches in general. We operate out of this huge ego, and we don't connect well with other men sometimes, right? Because our ego's too big, and we don't acknowledge other men because we say, well, they're better than us, so I need to be insecure about it, or whatever the right choice of words is. But what I'm hearing is you had such an ability just to be raw and authentic and vulnerable with those kids to a point where you humanize yourself more than any other coach probably did in their lives. And they appreciated that about you. And I can imagine if I interviewed one of those kids, they'd probably say that's why we love Jim Morris, is because when it got time for him to perform and walk the walk, he was scared. He didn't hide from the fact that he failed at it every other time he tried. But what happened is you chose differently this time, right? You said you're going to do something, and you led by example, and you showed those kids and anybody who watched the movie or followed your story that, like you said, your grandparents said, you can have anything you want, but you got to work for it. Yeah. And to me, that is the most impressive part of it. And in hearing it and like the real side of it, there are a lot of similarities to the movie.
Yeah.
For instance, it's your turn. Well, that was in a locker room. It really happened on a bus, but it still happened. And I believe your catcher in the movie did say, what about you, coach? You chase your dreams. So this is all very awesome. Let me fast forward, a little bit. I don't know how long you were in the minor leagues before this happened, but that moment that you got that phone call was it actually in Arlington?
I was in AAA playoffs and playing for the Durham Bulls, and we're playing the Charlotte Knights. If we win this game, We go to the AAA World Series. If we lose, we're out. We lose. And so we're at our lockers talking. And Bobby Munoz, who played in the big leagues, was trying to get back after elbow surgery. He and I are best friends in AAA. And so I decided I'm going to ride back with him in his pickup. We had all our stuff with us just in case.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're sitting there talking about which direction we're going to drive home from Charlotte. When the manager comes up and taps me on the shoulder, he goes, "I need to talk to you." And this is my sixth sense of humor, I guess. I look around. I look back at him and I said, "I don't think so." He goes, "Why not?" Because the last 6 guys you talked to are all crying right now.
Mm-hmm.
I choose not to cry. And he just shook his head at me. He said, "Come on." And I walked in his office and our big league general manager was there. And he goes, "You can smile. You're going to be in Texas tomorrow." And I didn't get it. And I go, "I know that. Bobby and I are going there right now." And he goes, "No, the big league team is in Arlington playing the Rangers." That's how I found out. And so instead of riding home with Bobby, I got a plane ride to Arlington the next morning. And it was so amazing. Johnny Oates, the opposing manager, God rest his soul, let 150 people in the game that day that had ties to me. My kids that I coached were there. My kids were there. I hadn't seen them in 3 months. Kids that I coached against, coaches that got in school buses in the middle of the night and drove 9 hours to the DFW area to see the coach who made a promise. And to me, that was just beyond awesome. And, you know, until that moment in time, this is where how non-baseball I was. And it shows Dennis getting out at the ballpark and then walking in through the gate. I didn't know this, but you go in underneath the stadium.
Yeah.
And they drive you in and here you go. And they let you out in front of the door. I thought, this is awesome. And then I got to sign my contract before I can walk into the clubhouse. And then I go into a clubhouse where there's Wade Boggs, who just got his 3,000 hit. Mm-hmm. There's Fred McGriff, Roberto Hernandez, Jose Canseco, all these guys I've been watching on TV, and now they're my teammates. And I have a group of high school kids to thank for that.
You know, that's, excuse me, that right there, because I'm a coach, that hits differently. You know, all too often we hear parents come up to us, and I still coach on a volunteer basis, and they'll come up to me and thank you so much for the impact that you've made on my son this, my son that, what you do for the kids. And I always look at them and say, serious? I was like, these kids save me. Whenever I coach, like, they give something to me and I come home and I'm in a better mood. They make my life better. And it's just that's what you had 13 high school kids to thank for that. That is a life full of experiences. You know, your story has touched hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people since then because of those 13 kids.
Yeah.
That's incredible to me. What was that moment like, man? When you got called out of the bullpen? The moment.
I've thrown 3 days in a row in AAA, so I'm convincing myself there is no way they're putting me in. And so for 8 innings, I'm sitting in the bullpen talking to big league pitchers about how to face the guys I might be facing if someday I face them. And 8th inning innings are like, "Morris, warm up." And I'm like, "Oh, they just want me to warm up in front of 40,000. That's cool." Mm-hmm. And 2 minutes later, I'm in the game. And I think that's when the size of it hit me. Mm-hmm. Because there are things that are normal that you remember since you were 5, like opening the bullpen and going in and smelling the dirt and the grass and the leather and the hot dogs and the popcorn. To me, that's baseball. And that's what we used to play for a hot dog and a Coke after a game. And as I'm running to the mound, everything flashes in front of me. The steps I've taken, the wrong directions I've taken, how I got put back on course. That when I stepped my spikes onto the dirt of the mound of the ballpark in Arlington, I'd come to one conclusion. I would not change one thing about my journey because that made me who I am. And I am that person because of those kids. I never would have tried again. I mean, the doctors told me it was impossible. And to be able to come back and, throw 98 to 102, that's pretty cool. And
That's a gift. That's a God-given gift. If I went out there and tried to throw 98, I'd be home crying, in my bed at night because I'd be in so much pain. So I mean, the fact that you could do that just shows that there's a higher power working, and he really had his hands on you, and it's an inspirational story. I mean, it's I was in 99, so I was just in college, right? And I'm watching this whole thing unfold. It's pretty darn cool. But now we're fast forward to today, and now you're an author of two amazing books, and the most recent one is Dream Makers, and I can't even get my hands on it because it's in reprint, man. Like, what's going on? Like, this thing has already been sold out. What's this book about? Talk to the audience about it.
Oh, for 20 years, and during my speeches, and then we do question and answer session after, people would go, the story is cool, the movie's awesome, Dennis is great. What are you doing? What have you done since then? Mm-hmm. And so for 20 years, I had almost this whole book about what I've been doing since. And it took me until 2017 to get the answer. And so in 2020, the book came out during COVID. Mm-hmm. And we had all this, we're going to go do this, we'll do these book tour, and we'll sign autographs, and all that gets canned because everybody's stuck in their house. Mm-hmm. And so it was just by word of mouth. But it ended up being something that very few people know about. In 2001, I signed with the Dodgers, and I probably would have made that team pretty easily. But I went from Chavez Ravine, where we had winter ball, and we were getting in shape and lifting and throwing and hitting every day, to a 5-day trek over to Vero Beach. And in 5 days, something happened to me that I have no idea. I had knew for 2 decades almost, I didn't have any idea. But I went from throwing 98 to 100 to not being able to play catch with the guy because I was afraid the ball he threw back at me was going to hit me in the mouth. And so we tell everybody that it's my arm. And Dr. Joe even goes along with it. It's his arm. He's quitting. But I was petrified. If I throw a ball up there 100 and they hit it back at me 120, like Mike Stanton now, mm-hmm. Giancarlo Stanton, I'm not doing that. So I quit. I go home. Eyesight starts going, balance issues. And so we film the movie. We do all that. But I'm still not feeling right and everything's off. Over the next 15 years and 70 surgeries later, I get diagnosed with Parkinson's. The drug they gave me helped me with my symptoms. I could smell and taste for the first time in years. But now it killed my stomach, so my stomach doesn't work, so I have to have gastric bypass too. So they do a deep brain stimulator in me, and they put 2 electrodes in my brain up here and a battery pack in my chest, which TSA loves, by the way, when you have a battery pack in your chest. And that became my medicine, was electricity to the brain, because my dopamine was gone on the right side of my brain. And because my left hand was affected first, they said it was the right side. So I do this brain scan, drink this radioactive fluid. They do an MRI on you and they go, yeah, you have no dopamine. That's why you're shaking and your balance is off. It got to the point I couldn't even button my own dress buttons on my shirts when I would go to speeches. So Shauna had to start traveling with me. And I stopped cooking because I couldn't smell and taste. And they do the surgery, and stuff that they said wouldn't come back did. Like, the hospital's overflowing, and so they have way too many people in the recovery room. And the lady next to me tells this nurse, she goes, I have to pee. She gets a bedpan, and I smell pee. Now, most people would go, I don't want to smell pee. But for me to be able to smell for the first time in years, that was pretty cool.
Right.
I get to my room finally. My wife had bought Italian food for herself, and I smelled that, but I didn't tell her because I was scared it would go away. And when we finally went home, I went, I could smell the Italian food you ate. And she goes, you could what? I mean, I quit cooking and everything. And so there were all those things. And this is a time when doctors, I would get these headaches for 6 months at a time. They don't know why, but I have scarring on my brain. And that was part of my Parkinson's slot they put me in, was in the pain region. And so they were just throwing out opiates at me, and those weren't working. And so I was taking them like I was supposed to. I didn't overtake those. But what I did do was I prescribed myself vodka to go along with the pills so I would feel better. Yeah. And I couldn't even get away from me, man. I couldn't walk. My dogs were tripping me every time I got up. So I ended up in rehab at 52. And I think for the first time in my life at 52, I had to concentrate on me. And I wasn't thinking about anybody else. I wasn't taking care of anybody else. This was the fractured child inside of a grown man who now had all these different problems and used something outside externally to make me feel better. And it wasn't working. And I will tell you this, I went to a faith-based place, and my counselor was a pastor. He loved baseball. He's been to every major league team, has stuff in his office from every major league field. He looked at me, he goes, "Great movie. Why are you here?" And I said, "I wasn't trying to die, but I wasn't trying to live either. I just stopped."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Well, do you have faith?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "God's with me all the time." He goes, "So if what I hear you saying is that God is with you all the time, so he's like your co-pilot, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "If you're in a vehicle with God, why is he not driving?"
Hmm.
And I think that hit me in a way where it was just a light switch. And I was like, oh, I'm better than this. I let this beat me, and I don't need to let this beat me. And that was 5.5 years ago. And I look back, it probably saved my life. But I will tell you since then, that was one of the chapters in the book that we got an ending to. God gave us 2 chapters in his infinite wisdom. The other one's a faith chapter. And if I go into everything that happened about me not having Parkinson's anymore, people are going to call you really mad. But I don't have Parkinson's anymore.
That's
and
fantastic.
There were a set of circumstances bringing that up that just blew me away. And I didn't even believe it happened to me. And I've been through some pretty amazing stuff, but that topped it. Even my dog heard it. And I had the only elective surgery I've ever had was in 2020, and they took the brain stimulator out.
Wow.
So I run, I lift, I walk, I do whatever I can, try to stay in shape, get back in shape, whatever a 58-year-old can do. I try to push the envelope and do more. And I don't have Parkinson's anymore. They did all the tests. They did a radiation test again. Your dopamine levels are fine. This doesn't happen. We don't know what happened to you. You try to tell them, and they're like, "We don't want to hear that," but okay.
Right. Of course. Well, I mean, I'm speechless. I had no idea about, obviously any of this. I mean, nor would I think I would. Right. But this is more inspirational and more impactful to me than the story that everybody knows about, which is your athletic journey. I mean, dude, people that know me very well are probably will be laughing at me when they hear this episode because I'm never speechless. But you're a guy that I definitely need in my life. I mean, just what you've overcome and the story you just told me, people don't ever wake up not having Parkinson's again once they have it. Like that's impressive. That's incredible, and it's just a testament to who you are. And I know you've had amazing support from your family. Shauna's amazing. She's such a sweet lady. I got to tell you, she's really, really sweet. I wished her a happy Mother's Day on Facebook yesterday. So
yeah, I'm in over my head.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I am too, man. I definitely outkicked my coverage. I outplayed my game with my wife. But I just, guys that are, guys and girls that are listening, everybody in this world goes through adversity. They go through tragedy. And I think what we all hope to strive for is the mental fortitude, have the faith, and to really choose how we feel every single day about who we are in our circumstances, because we have the power to choose differently. We can choose to be upset, or we can choose to fight. And like, Jim, you're the ultimate fighter, man, for real.
Thank you.
Like that. That's awesome. So nowadays, we got to land the plane here because, we're on a schedule, and I if I could spend 70 hours with you, I would. But now you're speaking. And from what I understand, people can actually book you to speak. So for my listeners that you own big companies or small businesses and you want to have the best individual come and speak to your sales force or your company, Jim's the guy. So how would they get in touch with you and to see if they would qualify for that type of event?
JimTheRookieMorris.com.
Perfect. And what I'll do, Jim, is I will make sure in the show notes that I put your website, the name of your book again, and hopefully you'll save me a copy.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe I'll put your Instagram handle. I don't know how active you are on Instagram, but it's another way for people to connect with you and just kind of see what you're doing. But with that being said, guys, I encourage you to look deep within yourself. And if there's a dream that you are suppressing and not going after because someone either told you couldn't do it or you're telling yourself that you can't do it, I encourage you to go out there and try, because you never know it if you don't. I mean, that's just, you would rather go through life knowing that you tried and failed than to never have tried at all, and you'll never know. So, Jim, if you don't mind hanging out real quick after the recording, but guys, thanks again for listening. If you got anything out of this episode, please share it out to your friends, family, whoever. People definitely need to hear this episode. And Jim, once again, thanks so much, brother. I'll see you guys soon.